wearing a mask while in labor. Yes. When I first heard that, I was like, y'all have lost your mind. Well, hello YouTube family, and welcome back to my channel. I am so excited to be back into the recording studio, you guys. I have so much to talk about, okay? I know I have been missing in action, and for those of you who do not follow me on other social media platforms, you probably don't know why I've been missing in action. Well, you guys could not tell from the title of the video. Your girl has been MIA from YouTube because, yes, I had a baby. Surprise, I guess. Yes, I had a baby. I actually gave birth to my daughter back in August. This entire time, I've just kind of been basking in the whole moment of motherhood and pregnancy. And with that said, obviously, this is a very interesting time to be pregnant, right? I'm sure you can imagine this was a huge eye-opening shift in my life and in my family's life, because this was not what we expected whatsoever. So yeah, I have the 411, the scoop, all the details for those of you who are pregnant currently, or you might have just found out you were pregnant, thinking about getting pregnant, whatever, and you're just curious of you know, how has it been being pregnant during a pandemic. So I'm going to tell you all about what to expect when you're expecting during a global pandemic, okay? All right, so the first topic I'm going to cover as it relates to what to expect when you're expecting during a pandemic is related to your doctor's visits, okay? So everyone knows that in your first trimester, you see your doctor every 4 weeks. And during those doctor visits, of course, they check to make sure you're good, your weight, they check the heartbeat of the baby, and so forth and so on. And it's a great time, you know, for you and your spouse, or you and your mother, whoever your support person is, to go and just check on the health of the baby as well as yourself. Right now, and I will say this with a grain of salt because I know every hospital and every city is different currently, but in the city of Dallas, the Dallas proper area, they are not allowing any support people to go to the visits with you. I know, sucks, right? But yes, right now, at least in those hotspot areas, they are not allowing any support people to come to those visits with you. Your support person can't even come into the doctor's office and wait in the waiting room. Yeah, sucks, right? Dallas in particular is will be considered a hotspot for COVID-19, so the rules are a bit more strict here than they might be in like a smaller city. So definitely make sure you call your doctor's office and ask them what the protocols are and what they're allowing and what they're not allowing. Next thing to expect when you go see your doctor's visits, again, regardless of if you are in a hospital or if you're at just a regular doctor's office, they will ask you a million questions just to make sure you haven't been exposed to anyone with the COVID-19 virus. And then they also will check your temperatures before you can even walk in the building, okay? So you should expect that every time you go see your doctor's visits. They are not doing COVID tests, thank God, but they definitely are making sure they take the temperatures. If you are going to your doctors, make sure you get there 10-15 minutes early so they can check your temperature, ask the questions before you go into your appointment. You don't want to be late. So I think I covered everything related to the appointments that are super drastically different. Everything else pretty much is the same. You still have to take your glucose test. You still can get your sonograms. The only thing that's different is you're not really allowed to have your support there. So now that we've covered the doctor's visits, now let's talk a little bit about the prenatal care offerings that the hospitals and the doctor's office have now changed as a result of COVID. So most hospitals offer some form of prenatal classes, especially for first-time mothers or just moms who want a refresher. So things like breastfeeding 101, labor and delivery 101, those type of classes. A lot of those classes have now moved to virtual classes. Before COVID, obviously you could go to the hospitals and actually sit in the classroom and go through some exercises with trained nurses and doulas and midwives. But since COVID has been going on, they have not been doing those classes in person. Yeah, all those, the overall classes like birthing 101 and all that have gone virtual. So definitely make sure you go on your hospital website or the doctor's office website and sign up for those classes. They're very helpful, especially if you are a first-time mom and you don't know what you're doing, like me. Now, let's move on to when you actually go into labor. All right, when you get into the third trimester and you go into labor, what is that experience like? So most hospitals, again, in areas where the cases are pretty high, they are only allowing one support person and a doula in the room when you go into labor. So that is something that is different. Normally they allow 2 people and a doula, but for the sake of the virus, they're only allowing 1 person. Again, definitely check to see with your hospital if that is the case. It could be different. So at my hospital, it was very interesting because I was the only person that was tested for COVID, and my hospital tests for COVID when you actually check in for labor. Like, I was actually dilated. I was actually dilated when they gave me my COVID test, like 7 centimeters dilated when they gave me the COVID test. So that was very interesting. Of course, if you have already gone through pregnancy, you already know when the contractions hit, honey, all that other stuff doesn't even matter. So they gave me the COVID test and I was not phased because I had no medication and them contractions was hitting me like a ton of bricks, okay? But that is something that most hospitals are doing. You will have to take the COVID test. You can't take the COVID test a couple days before. They will only give you the test when you check into the hospital. If you were to have a positive COVID test, they, at most hospitals, from my understanding, are separating you from the baby in the beginning. Now, my test was negative, so I can't really say what exactly they are doing, but I know at my hospital they were saying if you do test positive within those first 24 hours, they will put the baby in the nursery, and then after that they will bring the baby to you. I don't know what the reasoning for it is, but the goal is to just not to test positive, because I couldn't even imagine being separated from my child right after I just gave birth. Make sure you steer clear of people and sit down at home. When you go in for labor and delivery, let's say you wanted to do an alternative way of delivering. So you know there's things like hydrotherapy, which is a water birth. They are not offering hydrotherapy, again, in areas where there are hot spots. I have heard outside of the city, especially in Dallas, like if you live in Denton or Fort Worth, some of those areas are offering hydrotherapy, but in the major cities like Dallas, they're not allowing you to do hydrotherapy to give birth. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do a water birth, and unfortunately I could not because of COVID. So the next thing, I'm not really sure if this is the case for all hospitals, but at least the hospital that I gave birth in, I did have to wear a mask at all times. So I know you're probably thinking to yourself, like, what? Wearing a mask while in labor? Yes. When I first heard that, I was like, y'all have lost your mind. You can barely breathe as is, and then you want me to wear a mask while I'm in labor. I freaked out about it at first. I was crying about it. But then once I got in there, again, once those contractions started hitting, honey, I didn't even realize that mask was on my face. And if the contractions were really bad and I needed to say something and people couldn't understand what I was saying, I took that mask off and no one said a thing to me. So, you know, I think it really depends on the hospital and who's in the room when you're giving birth. The nurses didn't mind. The doctors did want you to have the mask on when they stepped in. But again, I think everyone's empathetic at that time, and they understand, like, you're in labor and you're in a lot of pain. So they're not going to just over exaggerate the fact that you might pull your mask down for a minute, especially when you test negative. The next thing, once you actually deliver the baby, most hospitals are allowing you to keep the baby in the room. Normally, babies go down to the nursery to give mom and dad time to sleep and get some rest after birth, but they are not sending babies to the nursery unless there is an issue. Or unless you test positive for COVID. So I was fine with it. I actually preferred my daughter staying in the room with us just because I don't know, it's just weird times, and I wanted to have my eyes on her at all times. When you actually are in the hospital, one of the things that we had to do was order food. Because a lot of the cafeterias within the hospital are closed because of COVID. So we definitely had to use like Uber Eats and DoorDash and stuff like that to get food delivered or go out and get something to eat. Obviously, I couldn't go anywhere, but you had to go get something to eat just because the cafeteria and stuff were closed. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Definitely bring you some snacks when you check into the hospital. Because when you're laboring, you need water, and you probably need just something to snack on, because it depending on how long you're in labor, you definitely want to eat something because you'll feel weak. So yeah, I think I covered everything. I feel a little rusty because this is my first video back in almost a year. You are a mom and you delivered during this crazy pandemic, definitely comment down below some of the things that were different at your hospital. I'm really curious to hear how everyone kind of has been handling this from a hospital perspective. It seems like healthcare all is on different pages around how to handle the pandemic. Really curious to hear how other people's labor experience went during this time. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I appreciate you tuning in, and until next time, you guys have a good rest of your day, night, evening, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. And I love you dearly if no one else has told you that. And until next time, see y'all later. Bye.